Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
Does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
The guys are ready, so let's hand over to Rob Rose, JB, PB and Aldrin, and get on with the show.
Welcome back, gents.
Hi, Rob.
We're recording a podcast in the NFL playoffs. Life doesn't really get much better, does it? Thank you, the three of you, for joining me, and thank you to all of our new listeners out there in Listenerland. In the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks, our listenership has nearly doubled. So if you happen to be one of our new listeners, let's talk you through the format for what is ultimately our flagship show. You have our recap show that comes out every Tuesday night, and then on Thursday night, you have the Pick'em show, and here's the format. Each of us, namely the four of us, will pick our game of the week. We'll talk you through the two teams competing, their various virtues and potential flaws, and then we pick a winner, the team who's going to end up with the win, with the W or the dub, and put them in Club Dub. You can agree or disagree by commenting on our various social channels, but with all of that explaining done, I don't think, even though we have effectively four of us and 4 games to choose from, a better slate of games all season. It is all thriller, no filler, and I cannot wait to get your thoughts on which of these powerhouses moves forward and who, with all of that star power on the roster, could be going home. So with 4 games, let's throw ourselves straight into it. Aldrin, kick us off with what is your game of the week this week and where do you see it being won and lost?
So my game of the week is the 49ers against arguably the best team of the regular season and the Green Bay Packers. And I just think this really poses a fascinating game because on paper, you know, the 49ers haven't been great throughout the year, very inconsistent, and the Packers have been fairly dominant. Now, the 49ers, however, over the past couple of weeks, put their destiny in their own hands and ultimately got into the playoffs and then won a playoff game to make it into this game. So it's really interesting because on the 49ers side, I think they've got one of the best multi-purpose weapons in Deebo Samuel. You know, when they've really got him going, even when he's not been a consistent threat in the passing game, he's added incredible yardage and touchdowns as a running back, coupled with Eli Mitchell, who I think has been a really, really solid running back option for them. But they just seem to have got things clicking offensively at the right time. On the other side, though, you've got the Packers who will come in fresh, having a bye week in the playoffs, with arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks of, our generation, certainly, with a really great dynamic group of receivers and running backs that, can dominate everyone. So I think we talked about it on Tuesday, didn't we? That it was a really great weekend of offensive play. And I think that's very much what you are going to see again here. I think it could be won and lost on the performance of Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think the Niners really need a good, clean, solid performance from him, because on the other side, you've got Aaron Rodgers, who is going to be all of those things and more. So they really need Jimmy G to be on his game, and they need a bit of help from those kind of dynamic players that they've got in that offense. So I'm thinking Ayuk, Samuel, Mitchell really need to step up and perform. Defensively, I'm still never really sure where the Packers defense is, in terms of, are they good? Are they just a product of the offense that means that they don't have to be spectacular? And in some games this year, it's really been a case of Aaron Rodgers has put 40 points up and it's not really mattered what the defense has done. The one thing for the Niners is Bosa left with a concussion, didn't he, in the weekend's game? And he's a real miss if he's injured, because I watched one incredible play where he started outside, ducked inside and got to the quarterback. And there's not many players that are that dynamic in that kind of pass rush situation. So I think it could really hinge on whether he can clear concussion protocol, make it to the game, and then ultimately get pressure on Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, I think it could be a real offensive back and forth ding dong.
Feels like two teams that rely on offense for me as well. So I'll certainly agree with your primary point there. I mean, I guess your point about the 49ers, they obviously had that great second half performance to come down from, what was it, 17-point deficit against the Rams in SoFi Stadium to get in. Then, I mean, they capitalized on a number of mistakes, some of them forced by the Cowboys in Texas Stadium. But then there were times when you felt they let the Cowboys back in only for the Cowboys ultimately to kind of almost metaphorically trip on their own feet. Do we see, I guess what I'm coming to is, you've just described the Packers as the most reliable, the best performing team of the regular season. Do we see the Packers making the kind of mistakes we saw the Cowboys make? Do we have any stock at all in the fact that they obviously found it pretty hard going even when they started to pull some starters out against the Detroit Lions in the final game of the regular season? I guess this is really my question of, for me, if the Packers are in the right frame of mind, well prepared, come to play, they should have too much. Realistically, Aldrin, how much of a chance are you giving the 49ers?
Well, I don't want to give away the end, but I'm giving them a real good shot.
Okay, all right. You make a fair point.
Let everyone else weigh in, and then I'll
more or
give
less
my
than a
final
49% chance.
Quite apt 49% chance for the 49ers. Phil, you do these lovely little play on words better than anyone we know. It's great work.
So good at he's quick at math. We could use him in Tulsa.
There you go. JB, go on. Give us your thoughts on Packers against 49ers.
I think you're right to kind of call out the 49ers letting the Cowboys back in. And I'm not going to say it was exactly the same game and exactly the same situation we've seen before in situations like a Super Bowl where a team was up, was it 28-3, that didn't end so well. And there's a connection obviously between those Atlanta Falcons and these San Francisco 49ers in Kyle Shanahan and seeing what we do there. But I think the interesting question for me was kind of what you posed there, Rob, of do we see the Packers making the same mistakes the Cowboys made? No. I see the Packers making a completely different set of mistakes, because Aldrin was very correct there in kind of talking about the strengths that the Packers have on offense and the strengths that they have on defense. And I think we're all going to be watching in, ready for the Packers special teams to really fluff it up, because that's been their biggest weak, like their Achilles heel for the entire season. You know, you put the ball in Aaron Rodgers' hands and you watch as marvelous things happen, but they've still got to get there first. And if they do slip up again and the 49ers can take advantage of those mistakes, which we have seen them do before with other teams, like you're giving one of the best offensive minds in the game a short field repeatedly, hypothetically speaking, you've got to imagine that is going to amount to, at the very least, points, and at the very worst for the Packers, touchdowns repeatedly. And for as good as the Packers can be on offense and as good as they can be on defense, no team can spot another team 14 points and be convinced that you're still in with a shout of doing it. Yeah, we talked about just now, we sort of talked about examples where big scores have been nullified and teams have come back. And again, we nearly saw the Cowboys do that at the weekend just gone. But the Packers need to be sharp in everything they do, unlike they have been for most of this season. Yeah, they've been one of the better teams, but not without kind of some shine that needs to be put on some elements of it ahead of the playoffs. Likewise, I think the 49ers have kind of maybe got a bit going behind them now. We saw them performed really, really well like week 18 last week of the regular season. We saw them again kind of dominate for stretches on against that Cowboys team. And if they're maybe kind of treating it as this, well, last game of the year, can't hold anything back, I could see this being a very, very close, interesting game.
There's a weird thing going on here. On the Tuesday show, we ended talking about the Titans and about, does anybody, even though they're the number one seed, consider them true Super Bowl contenders? I think the Packers have kind of dropped down the pecking order a bit just because they weren't in wildcard weekend. You saw great 49ers performance, great Bucks performance, great Rams performance. And just because the Packers weren't there, maybe they're not, they don't have that fresh film, constantly flickering on NFL.com and the various news outlets to remind us of just how great they are. I like your points. And I like Aldrin's as well. I mean, the only thing I suppose I want to land on that you've both said now is Deebo Samuel and Garoppolo, I think, are going to be key because the 49ers are going to need 7, not 3 when they get in the red zone. But yeah, maybe you are convincing me there is a way, there is a route to success for San Fran, even though, just to throw it in there, Aaron Rodgers is never more motivated as an NFL quarterback than when he plays against the San Francisco 49ers, his boyhood team who left him in the green room on draft day. I think you often see him bring his best when San Fran come to town. So a few bits there maybe that maybe swing it slightly towards Green Bay. But anyway, PB, go on, round us out. Who do you see as the key battles in this one?
I think it's all going to come down to the passing game, really. I think San Francisco are going to have to rely on trick plays. And actually, for San Francisco, I think there'll be a lot of run. I think they'll get Samuel in motion as much as possible. Jet sweeps and end arounds and things like that to try and catch Green Bay out. But for me, I think Garoppolo's going to have to play better than he did against the Cowboys. I'm not saying he played badly against the Cowboys, but I think he might have to do a bit more. For the 49ers, it's the defense rushing Rodgers as much as possible, trying to get the ball out quickly and force him to make mistakes. And how their secondary performs. I think their secondary might be a bit of a weakness for them. So I think that's where Green Bay are probably going to need to capitalize. But I could see the 49ers doing it. They're the team that have ended the season, in some relative form. They had to win and get in. They did that, beating in overtime, maybe fortunately, a tough Rams team. And then they beat the Cowboys this weekend, and the Cowboys have been hot at times this season. So I could see them going in and doing it. I expect the Packers to win, but it wouldn't surprise me for us to be talking next week about a staunch defensive performance from the 49ers coming out and win.
So Aldrin, you get to make a choice. Are you going to pick the number one seed in the NFC or the NFC wildcard team that scraped in the very last weekend of the regular season? Choice is yours. Tell us who's going in Club Dub.
I'm going to put the 49ers in this week.
As the music plays and you pick another underdog, Aldrin, I would be... Do you know what? I would question your judgment if you hadn't gone, 6-0 last weekend with your pick?
6-0, courtesy of the 49ers upsetting the number one offense in the league, the Dallas Cowboys.
I mean, you talk about red hot streaks and the 49ers having form. Well, you're on pretty good form yourself. So who could bet against the 49ers if you're happy to put them in Club Dub? And who'd have thought a few weeks ago that in the divisional round we'd be talking about San Fran being the first team that go beyond that velvet rope. So one game down, one team in. JB, give us your tie of the weekend and tell us how your two NFL juggernauts match up.
We are going to be talking about the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. I will start with the home team. The conquerors of my beloved Steelers, kind of the nail in the coffin for large Benjamin's career. And watching the first half, it wasn't great. Like, yes, the Chiefs got going, and yes, they were able to capitalize on mistakes, and they were able to go through and do what they needed to do to win, and ultimately win quite comfortably. But it wasn't, to me at least, and I will trust the three of you to sort of correct me on any kind of bias I might have looking at the performance. But it didn't feel like this was oh, what an amazing performance by the Chiefs. Oh, the Chiefs are going to buzzsaw their way through all of this for their third straight Super Bowl appearance. It felt like a team that needed to solve the puzzle in front of them and work through it. And if the Chiefs can keep doing that, great. Yes, they will probably end up being the AFC champions yet again. Yes, they will be looking for their second Super Bowl for Patrick Mahomes in 3 attempts. But there's a difference for me in trying to solve the puzzle that's being presented of a Steelers team that is admittedly incredibly one-dimensional, especially when certain wide receivers for the Steelers couldn't catch a cold. There's something else when you're presented with a team that can change the pieces in front of you and adapt just as well to change up what they're doing. So from a Chiefs point of view, that's what they need to go in and do. They need to go and prove that not only can they solve the Buffalo Bills that is presented to them first of all, but they can continue to solve a rotating Bills thing and sort of, okay, now we're getting a lot of Josh Allen, so let's shut him down. Okay, now we're getting a lot through the air to Stephon Diggs and Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox, and we need to shut that out and keep going from there. And the question to me from that will kind of be, okay, so this game is going to ride an awful lot on a Kansas City defense that has improved as we've gone through the season. They weren't great at the start, but just like last year, they have improved down the stretch as we've gone. I think a lot of pressure is going to be on those to do the same thing. From a Bills side of it, we sort of talked a little bit about this on Tuesday, the Bills had a perfect offensive game. No punts, no turnovers, 7 out of 7 that ended in a touchdown, excluding the kneel down victory formation at the end of the game. That's not been done since at least 1950. And while I hate to do this to everybody and focus on the infinite march of time, 1950 was at least 72 years ago. That's something really impressive. And I think it was Aldrin that commented on the fact that, we saw a little bit of the Josh Allen that we got last year, who took the league by storm and really showed what he was capable of. Every single one of the Bills on the field against the Patriots that time looked in absolute total control of whatever it was they wanted to do. If they wanted to run the ball, they were going to run the ball. If they wanted to throw, they were going to throw. If they wanted to create space, they were going to create space. And there was absolutely nothing that Patriots defense could do about it. And think about not just the players on the field, but the coaches who were trying to stop that. I enjoyed, as I said on Tuesday, that Patriots performance or lack of performance so much, but you can't deny that the Patriots as an organization over the last 2 decades have been incredible. They've got a very clear understanding of what they want to do. And the Bills essentially pulled their pants down in front of everybody and took their lunch money. So if that Bills team rolls into Kansas City, I kind of feel like one of those old classic Muhammad Ali boxing matches where we're kind of come out at the end of this thinking this is like the equivalent of the Rumble in the Jungle. I'm not quick enough to kind of think of something that could be the shuffle in Kansas City or something like that. I'll leave that to Phil, who's probably got about 3 off the top of his head right now.
How are you not a boxing promoter? That sold the fight with me.
In Kansas City.
I'm just thinking the Kansas City shuffle's a thing. So you could call it that. But yeah, just this game. And it feels
Jury,
like a
jury.
There we go.
Let's not do this.
It's to round out what I think this game being the last game of the weekend kind of feels like the NFL has looked at this and thought all of these games are going to be good. But what we're going to do is we're going to give everybody a treat and we're going to make this one the ice cream that everybody can look forward to.
We're back to food analogies, so I'm going to chip in. I mean, you're absolutely right in everything you say. The one thing for me that makes this such an enticing fixture is, on the one hand, you go, even though I still don't think the likes of Tyreek Hill have kind of hit top gear this season, the Chiefs have found ways to win. They've spread the ball around. Kelsey's been amazing. It feels like Mahomes is back to his best. And that defense, particularly down the stretch, you go, well, look, if they concede 25, 28 points, well, it's not going to matter because the offense is clicking now. The offense will put up 35, 40, maybe a little bit more, and the game will still feel comfortable. you have a kind of sense that the Bills could put up a lot more than 25 points. And all of a sudden, when you're looking at two teams that could potentially land, 40 points on the other, you do start to think every eventuality is possible. Blowout for either team, absolutely possible. Close game, high scoring, possible. Close game, low scoring, probably the least likely. So who's not going to be looking forward to this as a neutral? And I think you've summed it up really well.
The thing that did it for me at the weekend, I said on Tuesday, but the bit for me where the Chiefs just put up 35 points in the blink of an eye. I know you said, JB, they weren't great that first quarter. They didn't get going very quickly. When they get going, it's just ridiculous. They can put up 35 points very, very quickly. I think the Chiefs pose a significantly more difficult threat than the Patriots do, both offensively and defensively. I think that Chiefs defense has come on leaps and bounds from where we were lambasting them, in the early weeks of the year. Still not a brilliant defense, but much more frisky than they were previously. Mahomes just looks a much better beast at the minute than when, I don't know, I think earlier in the season it felt like he was always trying to throw deep and trying to throw those big splash plays, and I think he's settled his game down so much more recently to the point where consecutive 5-yard completions are enough to win you a game. It doesn't have to be 70-yard heave with a no-look pass. For the Bills, I said I think the Bills are the best team in the game at the minute, and I think I have to stand by that. I think Allen looks brilliant. That running game has meant that it's not all on Allen, which has made his game infinitely better. He's not making some silly decisions, and I think they got him running at the weekend as well, which was really good to see, because they've kind of had him just sit back and heave it and neglected the run game entirely. And then they went all to Singletary, and now I think there's a good balance where they do have some designed runs in for Allen. But I don't know. I think it could be a real back and forth game. It's so tough to pick.
Phil,
the Bills
which
won when they
of these two are the Bucks going to beat in the Super Bowl? Go on. Is it the Bills or the Chiefs?
Oh, I'd rather play the Bills, I think, than the Chiefs if I'm an NFC team, just because I think you almost know what you get with the Bills. Do you know what I mean? I think you can game plan for them a lot better. I think the Chiefs have more that they can kind of throw into the mix, trick plays and things like that. If we think about, like I talked about on Tuesday, the underarm pass to McKinnon for the touchdown. Mahomes he can come up with some crazy stuff. He was running for his life in the Super Bowl last year and still made or attempted to make some ridiculous plays. So I think the Bills are more of a standard football team, if that makes sense. There's less trickery. I think they just do what they do well. But then the Bills beat the Chiefs early in the season, didn't they? So they've had the upper hand so far. So the Chiefs have to do something different than they did that day. Otherwise, I think for me, they're going to have to start quick, because if the Bills get up, then I think it could get away from them. But, if they both going toe to toe and slugging it out, it's going to be a fascinating contest. But I think the Chiefs have more up their sleeve, and I think I would expect them to do it. But it could go either way. It'd be a great game. Hopefully.
PB, I've got to say I'm with you. For either team, as much as they can come back from deficits, because both offenses are so potent, you do wonder if scoreboard pressure will be a factor. I like that. But JB, I mean, the time has come. You've heard arguments from around our virtual room. Not only have you got to put one of these teams in Club Dub, I mean, whichever team loses, this is probably the first true NFL superpower that's going to be going home. I mean, you could maybe argue Bucks and Rams beats it in terms of, the way the fixtures are set up, but who are you sending home as well as who are you putting in Club Dub? Big call, this.
I think as the season has progressed, the Chiefs' offense and defense has risen like Dracula and more powerful than it has been before. However, this Sunday night, that Dracula will run into the Abraham Van Helsing that is the Buffalo Bills, and those Bills will march into the dawn and the AFC Championship game.
There are no words.
I'm going to have to mock up some sort of Josh Allen Dracula thing for social, aren't I? Okay.
Yeah, that yeah, wow. It's worth the entrance fee to Club Dub on its own, isn't it? Poetically.
Thank God no one mentioned a Hydra.
Yeah, that's one for long-term listeners. All of you in Listenerland who've been here since the very start. No mention.
The problem
of Hydra.
is, because you kept calling me out on that, I've had to now branch out, and this is all because of you.
Right, before we go even deeper into very niche territory with the history of our podcast, that would be seismic, I think. As much as I probably agree that I think the Buffalo Bills probably win this, to win in Arrowhead, I mean, that would be a huge shift in the power balance that is the current AFC way of things. I mean, we're already talking down the Titans, but to talk down the Chiefs against the Bills really speaks volumes for where the Bills are. But anyway, we've still got two more to do. So we've got the 49ers, now the Bills in Club Dub. PB, talk us through your tie and tell us who's going to join them.
So for me, I'm going to talk about Bengals Nation versus the Titans. As we all know, Saturday was the first time that anyone ever sent a text message about a Bengals playoff win, the first time since 1991, and they look good doing it. You know, I think if we revisit our show from before the season, you know, when we were talking off-season, pre-season, when we were looking at division winners, I think we all had the Bengals as the bottom of their division still, you know, making progress from last year. But, you know, not being close to playoff contention. You know, the Browns made the playoffs last year and looked good. The Ravens, you know, will stay injury-free. They'll look good. They didn't. The Steelers, yeah, you know, they might be there or thereabouts. Who knows what Ben's arm's going to be like. But the Bengals, you know, can't see them doing anything. And here we are, division winners, looking really, really good. I mean, you just talked then about the Chiefs being a superpower. And how well, you know, they've performed over certainly the second half of the season. The Bengals knocked them off in a real shootout, you know, week 17, winning on the last second field goal. So for me, you know, they're a real one to watch. They're kind of that young team with no fear, aren't they? I can't think of any particularly old, I mean, they will have some on the roster, but there's no particularly big name old heads that you think, you know, are going to carry, you know, ghosts of playoffs past. They're fresh. They're all new to the playoffs. They're, you know, this exciting offensive team. I think it's going to be an interesting battle to see how they come across against a Titans team that have been talked up over the last, you know, couple of years coming to the playoffs. We talked them up as a potential Super Bowl contender this year. And they always seem to kind of fall around this hurdle, don't they? Either the divisional round or the championship game. So it's an interesting one. I think the Bengals, Mixon's a great running back. I think he's really good, but I think the Bengals' focus is going to be on the air attack. Whereas the Titans are just going to be a kind of ground them out offensive game. I think, you know, if Derrick Henry's fit, they're just going to run him, you know, as much as they can. Is it Foreman or Freeman at the Titans? I always get them mixed up.
Donta Foreman?
Yeah, Foreman, I thought it was. You know, he's been running well since they signed him as well. So maybe they'll kind of, if Henry does play, they'll give him some breaks, or Foreman will obviously be the lead back. And we'll see what their receiving core can do with AJ Brown back, and you know, Julio Jones, I think is off IR as well. So, but I think they're more of a, you know, 5-10 yards dink and dunk rather than any of those big splash plays that we might see from, you know, Burrow throwing 140 or 50 yards to Jamar Chase to run him for a touchdown. So it's two, you know, real opposite ends of the spectrum styles of play. I think the Titans are going to, if they're to win, are going to grind it out, which they've done a great job of. They're the number one seed, so they're there for a reason. But the more exciting football, I think, will come if the Bengals can get, you know, arguably if the Bengals can get ahead, or if they're behind, I suppose, and have to chase the game. But yeah, a real interesting game to watch, and it's certainly going to be a tough one to pick. You've got your kind of experienced heads almost who've kind of been together for a few years and been to the playoffs a couple of times and not quite got, you know, as far as they maybe should. versus this young and exciting team with who've already defied expectations, so they got nothing to lose. Why not go for it?
I love that summation, because it's one of those that if you were, so as a pick'em, picking a winner, I'm like you, I think it's really close. But if I said to you the score, and I said the score's going to be 40 points to 10, you're imagining the Bengals win that, right? They're the team who could potentially put up big points. If I said the score was 21-18, I'd probably put it in favor of the Titans. So many ways this can go. I do think people underestimate the Titans enormously. I think they do so many things so well. And let's talk about both of these teams really briefly, in the sense that this, for me, is not only a great fixture, I think it pitches really the two best coaches in the NFL this year. Zach Taylor and Mike Vrabel, for what they've done, Vrabel and Taylor this year, I don't think there have been two better coaching jobs in the league. The injuries that the Titans have been able to roll through, and not only been able to get into the playoffs, but get in as the number one seed, the levels that they've all been able to achieve as a collective, even with their star men missing, I think has been amazing. And then, like you say, that transformation in Cincinnati. I mean, actually, both of these teams 5-6 years ago, 5-10 years ago, were amongst the basement dwellers and the perennial laughing stocks. And these two head coaches have done absolutely brilliant things to turn their fortune around. It's credit to both of them that you can talk up either team so well with the seasons and the challenges they've both faced. I think it's a real credit to the coaching staffs that they're even here.
I think it's a very interesting, almost clash of styles. You've got what I would describe as a very flashy Bengals team against a more grounded Titans team. I think the Titans, if they win this, are going to win this the same way they've won so many games previously. It's going to be a heavy dose of run the football, and then play action to go from there. Like, they're not going to win because of some amazing theatrics almost from Ryan Tannehill. Whereas the Bengals, you think, are going to win this by that Burrow to Chase connection paying off with at least one really big throw, really big play. And then because of that, it will then open like your T. Higgins and your Tyler Boyd and all of those other great options they've got combined with Joe Mixon. It does feel to me a little bit like the Bengals have got too much firepower for the Titans to cope with, especially with it, like if you line up the Bengals offense and the Titans defense and say kind of who do you feel has more skill, who do you think has more ability to do what they need to do, you would go with the Bengals offense. But I also think Rob's right in calling out Mike Vrabel as one of the best coaches in the league. That guy gets people ready to play. Setting everything else aside from what you would expect from a head coach, that guy gets people ready to play. And, I've said this before, you watch him on the sidelines and definitely get the impression that he really wants to look for a pair of shoulder pads so he can go in and have a couple of snaps himself. He's still not lost that. So on Tuesday's show, I kind of said, I think this is going to be anybody but the Titans, because I think the Titans are one of the most under the radar first round seeds in at least the last 10 years of the playoffs, if not longer. But Vrabel won't have them set out like that. Vrabel is going to have these guys ready to be like, right, we are the number one seed. Everyone is going to take us lightly. We are going to stomp these guys into the ground. They think they're a big deal because they finally won a playoff game after 30, 31, 32 years. We are going to show them that that is not good enough.
The Titans are an odd team for me because I think for much of the season they've been really poor. Like, they look like a really poor team. Yeah, they have kept winning in spite of that. I think a lot of games they've looked bang average. I think I can count on one hand the amount of times that Tannehill's thrown 200 yards. And yet, with arguably the best running back in the league out, since, what was it, Halloween, around about then that he went out. I mean, I find it ridiculous that Derrick Henry still ranks in the top 10 in rushing yards for the season for the fact that he's missed 9 weeks. But yeah, they're an odd team because every week I went into it, and when we were doing our regular season predictions, every week I went into it and thought, well, the Titans could lose this, and they didn't. And that just continued in spite of numerous injuries that they had. And, if you're a Super Bowl chasing team and you lose for large chunks of the game, you lose your premier running back and premier wide receiver, and that's a real problem, and they just didn't make it look like a problem. They just stepped up. Other players stepped up and made enough plays to get them wins. So they're a really polarizing team for me because I want to say they're a rubbish team, and yet they're the number 1 seed, and anybody is going to find it tough to beat them. That defense is better than you think. That offense is efficient enough. So they put themselves in really good positions to win. And like you said, Rob, I think the way they're coached is exceptional. They have a never say die attitude. They have that real old school mentality that has proved really great for them. On the other side, I love the Bengals. I think they've been probably one of the most exciting teams to watch this year. I think you could have said the Cardinals were exceptional for spells and the Packers have been good and Tampa have had some great games. But ultimately, I think the Bengals have been one of the more exciting teams and probably for a neutral and for a lot of neutrals going into it, one of the teams you like to follow, right? They've been interesting, a lot of great plays on offense, real dynamic kind of way that they've gone about offense this year. So they're a real treat to watch. I think if I wanted to pick who I wanted to see to go on, I would say the Bengals, but I just don't think you can count that Titans team out.
Yeah, I agree on all of that. The Bengals do have, it's the ticker tape, isn't it? It's the stuff that makes the highlight reels that they're just so good at. And also, let's not forget, they won that division. Like Phil said at the start, they won the division in a division with really competitive, really talented rosters. The Ravens had injuries. The other two, I think they beat on merit ultimately. And that's impressive enough for a second-year head coach and second-year QB. But yeah, go on. We've got there. Only one team can go in club dub. Who's it going to be?
I think for me, I'm going to go against the three of you who've all plumped for the Bengals, and I'm going to say the Titans, with the expectation that Derrick Henry's back and doing Derrick Henry things. I'm going to put the Titans in club dub.
So there you go. If you're new to the show, yeah, that's right. You've just heard us talk for over 10 minutes about how the Bengals are the most exciting team in football and do amazing things, including you, Phil, only to then turn around at the last minute and pick a team that was called, I'm paraphrasing, but I think Aldrin called them distinctly average and maybe even worse at that, a different point. Boring, yeah. So there you go.
Aldrin said that, not me. I said
well, indeed, it's your pick. I think I have gone for the Bengals, but I am certainly one of those who's a bit more to your way of thinking that I think it's hard to bet against the Titans the way they're playing. They are functional, but my God, they just do what they do as well as anyone in the league. It'll be another great one to watch. And that means there's only one game to go. And for as much as this is my selection, PB, it would be remiss of me to not invite you in to discuss in detail the epic tie that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Los Angeles Rams. This one for me has kind of, I don't know, it's kind of the mirror image for me of Chiefs Bills. You've got kind of those same dynamics at play where you've got the Bucs, like the Chiefs, of course, were the kind of conference champs last year. The Bucs have been very, very good through the year. But arguably they're coming up against a team. I mean, the Rams played as well against the Cardinals as I think they've played all year. There were things the Cardinals didn't do well that certainly worked in their favour. But you talked about it on the Tuesday show, JB, about the hoodoos and the monkeys that were taking off people's back. You know, Matt Stafford didn't only have a playoff win finally. He had a really impressive playoff win. You start to look at, you know, you were talking about, you know, the Chiefs having to work out an opponent and having to find those puzzle pieces. Well, actually, think of the pieces in the puzzle that the Rams have got. They've added the likes of Odell Beckham, and it's really, really working with Odell Beckham Jr. playing a really nice foil to Cooper Kupp. They've added Von Miller that feels unnecessary on the defensive side, but it's in no way disruptive. And I just think that, you know, I mean, the Bucs were, the 6th seed last season and kind of went to the Super Bowl having really knocked off a few favourites, you know, did so from that position as an underdog. I wonder really if the Bucs are an underdog this weekend. I mean, yes, they're at home. Yes, they've got experienced seasoned players when it comes to playoff football. I mean, none more so than Tom Brady. Even if Matt Stafford gets the monkey off his back, I mean, Brady's postseason record is epic. I mean, literally untouchable by any other player. I was about to say in the modern era, forget the modern era, in the history of the game. So, you know, are we due another vintage Brady performance, a man who doesn't seem to age and in the last few years, you could argue, has got better and better year on year? Or actually, are the Rams this true win or bust outfit, or ultimately Super Bowl bust or a Super Bowl or bust type outfit with the type of roster moves they've made this year? Actually, are they going to be too strong? Are they again hitting form at the right time? Are they now a mix of big time players who shine, you know, when the lights are brightest? I mean, for all the players I've mentioned that they've bought in, the Odell Beckhams and the Von Millers, they already had immense talent on both sides of the ball. Cooper Kupp, the triple crown when it comes to receiving this season. You've got Aaron Donald, you've got Jalen Ramsey. I mean, it just does go on and on and on. And do you know what? I was thinking to myself, you know, on paper, it'd look like the Rams would have too much for most people, you know, when you look at that coaching staff and the roster of talent they have at their disposal. But actually, even based on the performances at the weekend, even when those cleats hit the turf, I think the Rams look as good as anybody. And I just think they would take an awful lot of beating by any team, whether we're talking playoffs or in the Super Bowl itself. I think it's going to take something special to beat the Rams. Brady, you know, special is potentially his middle name. But Phil, do you really think the Bucs have enough to go again? Because if they want to win the Super Bowl, there's no harder test than the Rams at the moment.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, if you look at the team we had last year versus the team we have this year with the injuries that we faced and players walking off mid-game and stuff like that, then it's, you know, you'd say our roster is a lesser roster. But, you know, they're still putting up good performances as well. I think the thing that worries me, I'd have rather played the Cardinals than the Rams, put it that way. You know, I think the Cardinals would have given us a tough game, but I would have felt less kind of nervous about it. But I think the Rams, you know, as I touched on, I think on Tuesday's show, we lost to them last season. We've lost to them this season as well. And they almost, you know, you almost wonder if they have our number a little bit. But having said that, you know, I think we played them in the midst of all the issues with our secondary, you know, all of our injury troubles earlier this year. So I think that makes a real difference. But again, I think injuries are going to play a part, and it comes down to, you know, Tristan Wirfs obviously went down early with an injury last week, which forced Brady to get the ball out quicker. I think he had less time in the pocket than he has done in probably every game he's played as a Buck when Wirfs has been there. He's walking around in a boot at the moment. You know, whether that's precautionary or not, I don't know, but it's tough. Do you know, if he's 75%, let's say, do you risk him in this game, or do you hope that you've got enough to get past and then save him for a potential conference championship game in a Super Bowl, you know? So that's going to be a big factor as well in terms of how healthy he is. When you've got Aaron Donald on the other side of the ball, who's still as elite as ever, all right, he seems to be getting away with grabbing players by the throat and trying to choke them and throwing punches and stuff like that, because obviously the referees only see certain things when it comes to high profile players. But it's, as you said, they're an exciting team. They've stacked their roster and gone all in, picking up Von Miller from the Broncos, OBJ. They just got Eric Weddle back, signing him as a free agent, which is an odd one for me. Having had a couple of years out of the game, I think, and we saw when Gronkowski came back, it took him a while to kind of get up to speed. And I know it's a different side of the ball and the safety's a little bit of a different position, but we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, they're definitely a team that I'm nervous about, and I would say, yeah, I'm not 100% confident, but you've got to believe, as you say, with the best quarterback of all time under center, on any given Sunday, it's going to be a good game, I hope.
I think the big thing for the Bucks is those injuries, and maybe not just the ones that occurred in the last game, but, having lost Chris Godwin and just not having really a full strength receiver core. I said it earlier in the week when we were talking off pod that really plays into Ramsey's hands, that you've only got one properly good wide receiver, because Ramsey will just line up against him. And I know that Evans is an absolutely elite receiver, but Ramsey's an elite corner, and typically he keeps pretty good receivers in check most of the games. So I think that could limit the weapons that Brady's able to get the ball out to. And you'll need big games from, is ridiculously Brashad Perriman back? As if you were expecting him to be in a potential Super Bowl team again.
Well,
ridiculous.
He scored a walk-off touchdown, a walk-off winning touchdown, didn't he? I can't remember which game it was a few weeks back.
It's bonkers.
Yeah,
I've no idea how he's back in that team. But regardless, you're going to need a big game from him. I think Wirfs and Jensen came off with injuries. I know Jensen came back in. Wirfs came back in for a little bit. And I think I messaged you, Phil, and said, just get him off the field and rest him for next week, because this game's done already. But again, that line that they've got is a beast. The Rams, for me, have just come into form and fitness at the right time. They've got Akers back. They've got Cup and OBJ firing on all cylinders. Beckham Jr. looks incredible. I think the last 3 or 4 weeks, he's really stepped up and taken on the mantle of almost a wide receiver one, even though, Cooper Kupp's there. Higbee got involved really well at the weekend, and that made a big difference. So I just think they've got so many weapons. I love what the Bucks have done the last couple of years. I think they've been brilliant. Brady rolling back the years and looking incredible, but I don't know, I feel maybe that time might come to an end.
Yeah, this was the hardest of the 4 games this weekend for me to pick from. And I don't honestly have that much more to add. I think kind of the insight and the analysis the three of you have offered has kind of been spot on, has kind of covered all the points to talk about. I think it's an interesting game from a fan's point of view, because I think obviously you have Bucks fans rooting for the Bucks alongside probably Patriots fans who, now their team's out, are kind of want Brady to go on and have some success. Meanwhile, you've got Rams fans cheering on the Rams, and Lions fans, from having spoken to one of the guys I work with specifically, hello Monty, who are cheering on Matt Stafford because they quite like Stafford to go and have a good game. So I think that's quite interesting. But the only thing I can really think to add to this is, at the very start of our podcast's history, as we were talking about the Bucks and their march towards Super Bowl glory, Rob made reference to the fantastic NFL Network production America's Game, and Tyreek Hill sort of celebrating into the end zone, and just imagining that being the moment they talked about on America's Game, where the Bucks all agreed, and that was the time that we then chose violence. We took that personally. That was when we decided it was going to be our year. And there is a part of me now that thinks back to a couple of weeks ago and the other wide receiver Brown taking off his pads and his gloves and his shirt and doing some jumping jacks in the end zone at the Jets. And it being that moment of that happening, that coming up in an America's game and the Bucs being like, and that was the moment that we decided that this was our season and we weren't going to accept anything less. Like, it's got like back-to-back seasons now with that moment. You can kind of point to the Bucs as giving them all the motivation maybe that they needed. I like the Rams. I think the Rams are good. I love Sean McVay, like having attended one of those NFL UK live events for the Cardinals and the Rams where, you know, Bruce Arians and the Cardinals were there. And obviously with Rob, we're all in agreement that, you know, Bruce is the best and put us in coach and how can it be anything but a Cardinals victory? And then they brought Sean McVay out at the end, and I think we got 15 minutes down the road before we realised we changed our minds and we're now all Rams supporters just from hearing him talk. You know, we talk about Vrabel as a guy that can get people ready. I think McVay's just as good at that. So the Rams will be ready to play, but it just feels again like this is another one of those times where Brady is just putting the chisel into the history books.
Yeah, and I've got to pick a winner. Would I have imagined coming into this week, you know, a few days ago, let alone a few weeks ago, that I would be picking against the Chiefs and against the Bucs? I'm really not sure I would, particularly as they'd started to play so well, but I have. I've got on my sheet the Bills to beat the Chiefs, and also the fourth team going into Club Dub this week is the Los Angeles Rams. I would love to say I am incredibly confident that I'll go 4-0 with my picks this week, when actually I look and I could just as conceivably go 0-4. That really is, for me, the greatest compliment you can pay these four ties. I said at the start, all thriller, no filler. And there really isn't. 8 teams who I think can put on a show, and I can't wait. But gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. For those of you out there in listener land, make sure to follow our picks on all of our various social channels. And we will join you next Tuesday for the recap show that means we're only one more set of games away from the big one. Cannot wait. But thanks for your company, gents. Stellar work. Let's do it all again in a couple of days.
See you next Tuesday, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks a lot.
Philip.
You left that wide open.
This is amazing.
Remember to subscribe and be cool. Tell your friends.
The game